Welcome to this month's meeting. I'm sure I get the right name. Department of Commerce and Insurance Board of Architectural and Engineering Examiners. We'll take it away for the statement of necessity. Or do you want me to do roll call first?
You. Oh.
No, I think we should go with the statement of necessity first. Go ahead, Maria.
Thank you. Okay, thanks. Good morning, everyone. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Tennessee Board of Architectural and Engineering Examiners, which is taking place by electronic means utilizing the WebEx teleconference application on Thursday, February 4th, 2021. Notice of this meeting was properly posted to the board's website. As there is not a physical quorum present, a statement of necessity is read into the record and filed with the Tennessee Secretary of State as required by statute. Pursuant to TCA 844-108B2, a physical quorum is not present at the location of a meeting of a governing body, but in order for a quorum of members to participate by electronic or other means of communication, the governing body must make a determination that a necessity exists. That determination must include a recitation of the facts and circumstances on which it was based. Further, TCA 844-108A3 defines necessity as matters to be considered by the governing body at that meeting require timely action by the body, that physical presence by a quorum of the members is not practical within the period of time requiring action, and that participation by a quorum of the members by electronic or other means of communications is necessary. As stated, this is a regularly scheduled meeting for the Tennessee Board of Architectural and Engineering Examiners. The purpose of this meeting with members attending by teleconference is to address regularly scheduled matters of the board in the most safe manner due to COVID-19. All voting will be conducted by roll call. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's do roll call.
Yes, sir. Mr. Tibbs.
Present.
Mr. Bursite.
Here.
Mr. Brickta.
Yes.
Mr. Parker.
Here.
Mr. Campbell.
Here.
Ms. Doss. Melanie, I can see you, but I can't hear you.
Sorry, here. Thank you. I'm here.
All right, thank you. Let's see, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson is absent today. Mr. Wagster.
I'm here, and yeah, Rick Thompson had rotator cuff surgery yesterday, so he's recuperating.
He's had a litany of surgeries in the past couple months. Poor guy.
Yeah.
Let's see, Mr. Barrick.
Here.
Mr. Heathcote.
I'm right here.
And Mr. King.
Here.
Very well. Thank you very much.
We can move on to the guests. Michael, do you mind doing that part just because you can probably see them maybe a little easier than I can?
Sure, not at all. Guest-wise today, we have the members of the professional societies, Don Baltimore, Casey Anderson, Nathan Ridley, Mr. Gwaltney from Lipscomb University, and I believe that is all aside from staff and board members. And then if I may just roll right into the next one, Mr. Barrick's introduction. Mr. Barrick is new to the board. He was recently appointed and comes to us from Smith Seckman Reed, and I told him I would do this for him, but I'm also going to turn it over to him. He has been with Smith Seckman Reed for 47 years, and since 1974, and has been a mechanical engineer. He has served as chief executive officer and now serves as board chairman and senior principal of SSR. And Mr. Barrick, would you like to add anything to that?
I think you did just fine. I'm glad to be here and hopeful that I will be of help.
All right. Thank you, sir. We could move on now to, let's see, review the agenda for changes. Okay, I just have one. I have again put on the engineering committee old business decoupling and technology degree, which were discussed by the committee yesterday. I would ask that we could, or I would request that we remove those from the agenda of old business today and just have old business reflect definitions.
All right, I guess we can, do we need to make any kind of motion about that at all, or just move on?
I think go ahead and let a motion should be made since it's a change to the agenda. I think we should have a motion and a quick vote to accept those changes.
Okay, can I get a motion and a second?
I will make,
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry. Something was flaking out here.
Sure thing, Robert. I proposed a change to the agenda that I had submitted by, I have again placed the engineering committee business of decoupling and technology degree under old business for the full board. And I requested that we scratch those from the agenda and let the old business reflect definitions.
I'll make
Okay.
that motion.
I think we already had a motion from Frank. What about, is that a second then from you?
I'll second, yeah.
Okay, we have a motion and a proper second. I think it's roll call vote.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Tibbs.
Yes.
Mr. Burside.
Yes.
Mr. Brigtoff.
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yeah.
Ms. Doss.
Yes.
Mr. Wagster.
Yes.
Mr. Barrick.
Yes.
All right, thank you all.
Next is professional society reports. Michael, I'm gonna also go back to you again, just if you don't mind calling them out in the order that you see them or that they arrived, whichever is easier for you.
We need to back up one step and pass the minutes from the December 2020 board meeting. I had recently sent you all an updated version with some corrections to phrasing and grammatics, but no content changes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sorry, jumped ahead of that. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Hey, Brian, this is Alton. I had one amendment to that I'd like to make if it's the appropriate time.
Oh, please say it now. That's perfect.
Okay, under committee reports, about the fourth line down, it refers to ETAC, and it should have been EAC.
Okay. Did you guys get all that, Michael?
Yes, sir, we did. We can add that to the change, and that can just be added into the motion to accept the minutes.
Okay. So now everyone seeing the minutes that were presented as well as Alton's edit, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. This is Robert.
Second, this is Frank.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Tibbs.
Yes.
Mr. Burside.
Yes.
Mr. Brigtoff.
Yes.
Mr. Parker.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Ms. Doss.
Yes.
Mr. Wagster.
Yes.
Mr. Barrett.
Having not been there, I'll abstain.
Very well, sir. Thank you. And now for the professional society reports. Well, Nathan, since you've got your camera on and you've caught my eye, you get to go first.
Okay, that's cool. Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it. Good morning, members of the board. I'm Nathan Ridley. I'm here virtually, I guess, on behalf of the Tennessee Society, the Tennessee chapter of the American Society of Landscape Architects. Our legislative friends are will return to regular session on Monday, February the 8th, just this coming Monday, and will receive Governor Lee's State of the State and budget address. And even though they started on January the 12th, the filing the budget and the appropriations bill package, that really gets the legislature started, because I've told y'all before, that's the only bill they really have to pass. The filing deadline for legislation is in the Senate is Thursday, February the 11th, the close of business, and that sort of gives us the universe of threats and opportunities that will be available this year. Just a word to the wise, building access to the Cordell Hull building, which is the state legislative office building, as well as the state capitol, is extremely limited. Most of y'all on this call participate actively in the legislative process, and before, it's sort of like going to a day or evening at the county fair. It's not like that this year. You have to have an appointment with a legislator and to clear security, and they don't have much sense of humor about it. So you can't show up with, 100 Chick-fil-A chicken biscuits and say, I want you to distribute those for me. So just be very sensitive to their protocols. They're trying to keep everybody healthy, and the Senate's by appointment. Well, I guess all legislators are by appointment only, and just know that building access is very limited. Then on a brighter note, to close, the National Convention for the Landscape Architects is going to be in Nashville. We're cautiously optimistic. We're proceeding as if we can meet in person, and that is November 19 to 22 on 2021. Late in the month, just before Thanksgiving this year. So we're excited about that. As y'all know, that you participated in one of those national events before, that it's sort of like a little duck. It doesn't seem like much is going on right now, but there's a lot of paddling underneath the surface of the water as you try to line up your speakers and get the tours that folks like to go on and get everybody's accommodations squared away. So even though it's a lot of work, we're very excited about that. I believe it's the first time this group's ever been to our city. And that's all I have. Thank y'all for your patience and for hearing from me, and happy to respond to any questions or comments.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions from Mr. Ridley?
If I may add, this is Blair. Also, for ASLA, our executive director has changed to a different individual, and that transition has been remarkably smooth. So, Nathan, I'm sure you have something to do with that as well. So I thank you for that.
Yes, Erin Tharp in Morristown is doing great. So
yeah, she really is. And she jumped into it because there's a lot going on. Like you said, under the surface, there's a lot going on. So anyway, we're real pleased.
Thank you, Blair and Michael.
Thank you, sir. Let's see, we will move on now to Ashley Cates from AIA Tennessee. Ashley, there you are.
Sorry, had to unmute myself. Good morning, I'm Ashley Cates, Deputy Vice President of AIA Tennessee. I feel like the little duck, Nathan. So we've got a lot of things going on. We are kicking off our programming this year. We're doing things a little differently. We're rolling out to the membership that most of our programming up until probably the end of August, it's all going to be virtual. So we are reimagining our Day on the Hill to do a Speak Up series, kind of an advocacy education program, and then doing several key team meetings with legislators. But due to the time constraints and the odd scheduling and trying to get people, attending via Zoom, we're going to kind of choose quality probably over quantity this year for our outreach to legislators. In addition to Speak Up, we are going to host a disaster training program in June, and our planning committee is working on that June 3rd and 4th. That will also be virtual. We'll roll into our conference on architecture, and that will be at the end of August, virtual. And then we are there's a new series focusing on diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. And that will be something that we will be hosting at the beginning of October. And so we're working on sponsorships, trying to get as much as we can so our members can get their continuing education at minimal costs, so they can continue to be AIA members and get their requirements. Other than that, it's just planning the new year. Legislative session, of course, this is upon us, and that's what we have right now.
Oh, great. Okay. Are there any questions for Ashley? All right. Thank you. Then we will move on to Casey Anderson from ACEC TSPE.
Good morning. I'm Casey Anderson. I'm the Executive Director of the American Council of Engineering Companies of Tennessee and the Tennessee Society of Professional Engineers. I always love when I get to go after Nathan because he's just so much more eloquent than I am about the goings on in Nashville. But it's so far been a little slow, so we're waiting for the tidal wave to come crashing down. But in other news, we are looking forward to celebrating Engineers Week, which is February 21st to 27th this year. Lots of virtual activities going on around the state. We've got a lot of folks who are going to actually be virtual in classrooms. We've got some in some of our communities who are able to go into classrooms and work with students there. So big focus on engineering this month. That's exciting. The only downside of this year, really, not the only obviously, but a big downside is particularly in Tullahoma with our engineers who are out at the Arnold Air Force Base. They do a huge shadowing project every year during Engineers Week, which is just to me one of the coolest things that happens because it's a side of engineering that a lot of kids don't get to see, a lot of adults don't get to see. So that's on hold this year, but lots of banquets going on and lots of virtual and in-person activities for eWeek. So we're excited about that. We did a senior principals forum last month. I think that I mentioned to you all that we were planning to do it. We had about 75 senior principals from firms around the state there. We did a little bit on liability, some financial forecasts, things like that. We continue to have chapter meetings across the state. Those are being held virtually, and we're seeing really good attendance, typically between 60, 75, 80 at each of those, which has been a really good way to keep people engaged and keep them getting their PDHs as required. We also, for NSPE members, and I know some of you all are, we just unrolled every year there are 15 free PDHs that come with that membership that are all virtual. Those have all, there's an updated list of those that are all online. They also at NSPE have just hired an ethics, a staff ethics person who will be doing other things too, but she's an ethics expert. So TSPE Tennessee we're gonna work with Kentucky and South Carolina and do a joint meeting specifically on ethics with her and since we've got an expert in-house, seemingly in-house now. So we're excited to have that opportunity. We are rolling out the next session of the PE exam review. So if you all know anyone or if staff, if you get any questions about where can I take a review class, we are offering one this year. I believe it starts next week, but it's a 10-week session. Each session is on a different component of the general exam. And it leads 10 weeks up to that spring exam date. We do allow people to audit individual classes. So if there are, any engineers who reach out to you all and ask, where can I go get a refresher on, y'all would have to fill in the blank there, but on any of those 10 different sessions, you can audit individually. And it's a good way if somebody needs both the refresher and the PDH for it, it's a good way to do that. So we're grateful for that. And we continue to work with Lipscomb and ASCE on project, and they're both really good partners. The other exciting thing that none of you have heard about yet is ACEC has a new research institute. They have, for the last year, been putting together some impact studies on the engineering industry and its impact on society, et cetera. So the second phase of that is being released today. And this one is the impact on the engineering industry's economic contribution. So when you drill down to the Tennessee specific facts that are contained in that study, and it pulls architecture and the AE, really the greater AE community in together, because there's so much overlap in much of it, but it's a significant engineering piece. The AE direct contribution is 22,600 direct jobs, which counts for just under $2 billion in direct wages in Tennessee and a $5.3 billion direct output. And then the total contribution, which includes direct, indirect, and induced contributions, is 69,900 jobs, $4.3 billion in wages, and $14.9 billion in total output. So I will make sure that that everyone has access to that report. It's this month's, this section is 31 pages long. There's a lot of great information in there, but it's going to be, I think, tremendously valuable when we look at the impact that engineering has on the greater community, both from a financial standpoint and from just a health, safety, and welfare standpoint around the country. So I think that's all that I have today.
Thanks, Casey. Does anyone have any questions for Casey? Okay, I have one more, Mr. Baltimore with the Interior Designers.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, especially for our first meeting of the year. For the record, I'm Don Baltimore, representing Tennessee Interior Design Education Advocacy. Our members, the registered interior designers, as the other professions, are working as best as possible under the pandemic circumstances. Most meetings, if not all, are held virtually, so everyone's getting to be an expert at Zoom and WebEx. Now, we are ready to participate in the new session of the General Assembly, but as Nathan said, it looks like we're not going to be able to participate very much directly with all the restrictions on attendance, but we'll certainly be monitoring legislation and voicing our opinion on it if necessary, and we're ready to work with the board and the other professions on any legislation that does appear, but at this time we have no legislation that we will be initiating. And so that's pretty much it. My report's short compared to the others, but we're ready to work with all of you and see what happens with the legislature, and especially in these trying and difficult circumstances. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Michael, I guess we are okay to move on to the legal case reports.
Yes, sir. Stuart.
Good morning. Yeah, good morning, everyone. This is Stuart Huffman, Disciplinary Counsel. We'll start with a legal report number 12020084201. The complainant hired the respondent to do a building inspection or structural review for this building, paid $400 to take pictures and provide an inspection report. The complainant waited about a month for a one-sentence report and the respondent offered a full refund, but they have not received that yet. This was reviewed by board member Stephen King. The mitigating factor here is that the respondent is registered as a home inspector. The aggravating factor here is that they're using the appellation engineering in the business name, email, website, and they're not registered as an engineer. So the recommendation is authorize a civil penalty of $1,000 for improperly using appellations and demand the appellations be removed. And also, I put in here to refer the complaint to the home inspector licensing program and see if they want to do something also.
Okay, thank you very much. Any discussion? Or a motion? Or anything else? Can you guys hear me okay?
I recommend we approve the recommendation from, or I move that we approve the recommendation from Mr. King.
I'll second that motion. This is Blair.
Thanks, Blair, and thanks, Rob, for your first official motion. We have a motion and proper second. Roll call vote?
Yes, sir. Mr. Tibbs. I'm sorry,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I thought you were, you wanted to discuss something else.
No, I was
Okay.
getting ready to vote here. Okay,
I
sorry.
got you. Okay. Well, we've got you logged as a yes. Mr. Tibbs,
Yes.
Mr. Bursai,
Yes.
Mr. Bricktow,
Yes.
Mr. Parker,
Yes.
Ms. Doss,
Yes.
Mr. Wagster,
Yes.
Mr. Barrick.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we
Okay,
can move
number
on to
two.
the next. Yeah, and you can just keep going. I won't interrupt you
Okay.
again.
Okay, thank you. It's 20200957001. The complainant purchased a house and the respondent is a civil engineer of record for the development. The complainant is arguing that the respondent was responsible for reviewing the work by the contractor / developer and is complaining more about the grading and the topsoil that was placed around the new build. There is some standard language in the contract and says that the respondent is responsible. And this was reviewed by board member Ricky Bursai. There's no evidence that the complainant has issue with the design of the engineer. It's more of the grading and stuff that he believes that the contractor and developer is responsible for. So there was no obligation for the engineer to review this work. And so the mitigating factors is there's no contractual duty and there's no fault found on the respondent or the engineer. So the recommendation is to close this one.
Okay, do we have any comments?
Brian, this is Frank. I guess my only comment there is, and I agree with the decision. But is this being turned over to the contractors licensing board? Because I do see here that the complainant should have received from the contractor that he has gotten with an engineer and gotten approval.
I would have to check and see if this was also referred to the contractors licensing board. If not, I mean, we can always recommend that we send this over to them.
All right, any other comments or motion?
This is Frank. I move we approve the recommendation to close.
This is Robert. I second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and proper second. Roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Tibbs,
Yes.
Mr. Bursai,
Yes.
Mr. Bricktow,
Yes.
Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Doss,
Yes.
Mr. Wagster,
Yes.
Mr. Barrick.
Yes.
Thank you. Stuart?
Number 3, there's 2 represents. This one's 2019-061-821. The previous decision was to send a letter of caution to the respondent and require the principal architect to pass the laws and rules exam. Turns out that they were not registered as a firm here in Tennessee. There was actually no work being done in Tennessee, so that's the reason for the original decision. The new information on this is that the board issued the letter of warning on October 4, 2019, and instructed the respondent to pass the laws and rules exam. The letter was sent out October 16, 2019, and then on around January 23rd, 2020, the board reached out to the respondent and requested to take the exam and return it as soon as possible. When we finally did get that, the respondent failed the exam, and then the board had requested the respondent to retake the exam numerous times with no response. So the last requests were on September 9th, 2020, and November 10th, 2020. So what we're recommending now is to authorize a civil penalty of $2,000 for failure to respond to the board and pass the laws and rules exam.
Okay, thank you. Comments? I think from board privilege, this is one of the first times I've heard that someone was not able to pass the exam. I guess that's a little troubling, and their lack of response is a little bit troubling as well. Is $2,000 a typical, I don't know if we've ever had it, but maybe other members would know. Is this pretty in line with what we would typically do for this type of thing? I mean, that's a little different.
Brian, I'm not sure. I'm probably not going to answer your question. This is Robert. Sorry, I'm not going to answer your question. But I kind of go on a little bit with you. It's troublesome that somebody can't pass the law and rules exam. It's an open book thing, which means they may not even have tried. And then that they've been so, kind of thumbed their nose for 2 years almost. It almost seems like this is a case to suspend a license or something until they do that. And that may seem extreme, but this just seems like an individual that is not showing a lot of concern. And do we really want people like that practicing? That's maybe not an appropriate way to look at it, but it just seems a little off the shelf to me.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was thinking too. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to necessarily go unprecedented, but it does seem like what you're saying too. It's like most times passing the test is not an obstacle, But anyway, still open up for any other conversation or clarification.
Brian, this is Frank. I move that we authorize a civil penalty of $2,000 for failure to respond to the board and pass the laws and rules exam.
Okay, that's the motion. Do we have a proper second?
Hey, Brian, this is Alvin. Before we get the second, we haven't been going to discussion after it, so I wanted to enter this now. Should we set a timeline for this individual to pass the laws and rules exam? It appears that he's been fairly cavalier in his approach to this response.
We can add that, Stuart.
Well, with the civil penalty and everything, he's going to have 30 days to respond and pass. So if he doesn't respond within 30 days, then we can just go ahead and go after, a hearing and a suspension.
is it important or incumbent on us to make that clear to him in whatever our response to him is?
Well, it will be made clear that he has 30 days to respond.
Great. Thank you, Stuart.
You're welcome.
Okay, we have a motion and out on the floor. Do we have a second?
This is Ricky. I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a proper second. Roll call vote.
Could we have a little discussion before we vote?
Sure. We can still keep the. We haven't voted yet, so we can still. If there's any other comments, I don't know who said that, but please go right ahead.
Yeah, this is Rob. Excuse me, I'm holding down a button here. I think the proper order for this is you get a motion in a second and then you have discussion on the motion. But my question is simply a question of consistency, and being a new person, I would just be interested in knowing that this is somewhat consistent with what we have done with something similar in the past.
This is Stuart. I would say this is probably the first, at least since I've been on the board for 2 years.
Rob, this is Robert. I've never known that we've had anybody to fail the law and rules exam, ever. And I think
maybe a better question is, when somebody ignores you, is a $2,000 fine something that I'm sure you've been ignored before or not responded to? Is a $2,000 fine somewhat consistent with what you've done in that case in the past?
And that penalty is $1,000 is the standard penalty, and because we were ignored twice on September 9th and November 10th, is why I went with the 2,000.
Thank you. That helps me. I'm good.
And this person is registered, so if they weren't registered, we couldn't go after that penalty. So we'll make that clear, because it's only for registrants.
Stuart, this is Blair. Like everyone is saying, I've never known anyone not to pass the laws and rules exam. But thinking further down the road, so let's say the civil penalty is given and he doesn't respond any further and whatever. How does this affect his licensure, or do we, as the state of Tennessee, contact the other where he may be licensed elsewhere, or how does that work? You understand my question?
Yes. Because right now what we have is just a letter of warning, which is not really a formal discipline.
Okay.
That's why we were wanting to go for a civil penalty, which becomes formal discipline. If they ignore it, and then we have to go to a hearing, or if they agree to pay it and pass the laws and rules, then that information, I believe, this would be more of a question for Michael, but I believe that information is put into the database and then other states could see it. But at this point, I mean, we really don't have any formal penalty right now, and that's why we're trying to just get the authorization for the penalty of the $2,000 for failure to respond.
Great, that does answer the question now. Thank you.
And to verify, this is Michael, to verify, we do report discipline to the national organizations.
Thank you.
This is Robert. Just kind of a question. Rob, did you get provided the penalty violation sheet or in our laws and rule or in our rules that we have?
I'm waiting to see. Is somebody going to answer that, or are you able
It
to?
was for Rob Barrick. I'm sorry. Maybe I didn't make that clear. I didn't know. I mean, his question is a good question about consistency and all this, and I didn't know if he had the document. We've got a document that we use to look at our penalty ranges. I didn't know if he had access to that.
Yeah, I think Rob's muted.
I'm sorry, I forget to push the button. Forgive me. I don't have access. I got information on the engineering committee. I got engineering committee documents, but I did not get AE board documents, I don't believe.
This is Michael. We'll get you all of those documents right after this meeting today, Rob, including Robert, the price or the fine sheet, the whatever, the calculator or the scale for the fines.
Yeah, thank you. And Rob, just for your information, it's something that we kind of use. Well, we do use it to try to be consistent in what we're doing, and it's got the option to have mitigating factors and other things, so that we're not, we're not going out down a road we've not traveled before.
Hey, Brian.
Thank you. That helps.
Yes. Yes.
So if I understand right, so our motion and our second is a $2,000 fine and to take and pass the laws and rules exam. And I think I heard Stuart say if the response didn't get a response within 30 days, then we can move on with suspension. Was that correct? Is that what I heard?
Stuart, you may want to clarify, but that's what I understand.
Right. I mean, once we would pursue this for a formal hearing, and in that formal hearing, we would request either suspension or revocation and a fine.
Okay. And that would be if there isn't a response in 30 days. Is that right?
Right. But
okay.
if you want to put that in the recommendation to authorize the penalty and failure to respond, then pursue suspension or revocation in a formal hearing, that may be at least a little bit more clarifying.
That might be good. I know we don't get this a lot, but I think on applications that we see come through, there's certainly other states certainly suspend people for not responding. Not that we have to follow what other states do, but suspension wouldn't be out of line. But I think what we're laying out here is a reasonable path. But I think it would make sense to go ahead and mention that what would follow up would be a formal hearing with suspension and possible revocation.
Stuart, this is Frank. I'd like to amend the motion and adding the information that you just brought up. If you could put it in the proper form.
To authorize a civil penalty of $2,000 for failure to respond to the board and pass the laws and rules exam. If the respondent fails to respond within 30 days, formal hearing will be pursued for suspension or revocation.
Stuart, can I hold you up? Mr. Tibbs, I think we're picking up a lot of your background noise. Would you? Thank you, sir. Go ahead, Stuart.
So what I would suggest is just to authorize a civil penalty of $2,000 for failure to respond to the board and pass the laws and rules exam. And if respondent does not respond within 30 days, to pursue a formal hearing for possible suspension and revocation.
Okay,
And
Brian,
other penalties.
Brian, I'd like to make that my motion. Amend my motion to that.
Okay, that's your amended motion. Was it Ricky that seconded? I'm sorry, I can't remember who seconded. If you accept that amended motion.
Brian, yes, this is Ricky. I will second that amended motion.
Okay, so we have a motion and a proper second, all amended. Roll call vote.
Yes, sir. Mr. Tibbs.
Yes.
Mr. Burside.
Yes.
Mr. Brickta.
Yes.
Parker.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Ms. Doss.
Yes.
Mr. Wagster.
Yes.
Mr. Barrick.
Yes.
Mr. Tibbs, we're picking up your background again. Thank you. Stuart, I guess we're ready for number 4.
Okay. 2018-084241. The original board decision and recommendation was authorize a formal hearing, civil penalty of $3,000, and the respondent is also to pass the laws and rules exam. This stems from the allegations of a violation of proper conduct of practice, service in areas of competence, and misconduct. So after review, what had happened in this case was the respondent's drawing was submitted that included a dining area with occupancy of less than 46, and it was separated by 3 42-inch dividers and an area labeled as dining and serving area for 40 occupants. Each area had a separate egress and ingress. Respondent believed that these 2 separate spaces that were each less than 50 occupants and less than 750 square feet classified it as a B business. The total square footage of the building was less than 5,000 square feet. So based on these terms, the drawing was not stamped by the respondent. Complainant questioned the use occupancy classification, stating that the 42-inch walls do not count as fire-rated walls, and pursuant to IBC 2012, the building should have been classified as A-2 assembly since full occupancy is over 50 occupants. Complainant then asked for proper stamp plans. Respondent then argued that under the IBC 1985 and Tennessee Reference Manual for Building Officials and Design Professionals, revised in December of 2015, restaurants under 100 occupants shall be classified as business occupancy. Respondent further argued that under IBC 2012, Section 102.2, other laws, it states provisions of this code shall not be deemed to nullify any provisions of local, state, or federal law. TCA 62-2-102, Section B, states structures classified as business less than 3 stories in height and less than 5,000 square feet did not require sealed drawings. So even though there was disagreement as to the occupancy classification, the issue is moot because respondent eventually provided a full stamp set of construction plans that were required by codes for permitting and construction. Drawings were also sealed by a licensed engineer, and the building was constructed and has been occupied for over a year with no issues or discrepancies. With the review, respondent should have known the proper occupancy classification. Instead of arguing with city codes, proper stamp plans should have been submitted the first time, and this matter would have most likely been avoided. Respondents should recognize the primary obligation is to protect the safety, health, and welfare of the public when performing his duties. seems the issue is more of a personal matter between an individual at City Codes and the respondent. So when I reviewed this, because of the respondent issuing proper set plans and everything, I believe that the competency and the misconduct allegations should be dropped. However, I would authorize a civil penalty of $750 for failure of proper conduct of practice and pass the laws and rules exam.
Before we get started, Frank, did I see you had reviewed it? Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, this is a person we've dealt with, and he's always arguing over codes and everything. But there's 2 or 3 things, Stuart, in your new information that was there before. I guess the one that concerns me the most is it says that the building has been built and there's no problems. I'm paraphrasing, but how did he get a building permit if the building department didn't want to issue it to him? That's question number 1. The other couple of things, and one that's irritating, in the Tennessee reference manual for building officials, and even revised in December 15th, it still refers to the 1985 standard building code. That says IBC, but it's the SBC. And believe it or not, the code has changed quite a bit since 1985. What the other thing that respondent argued was under the IBC 2012, and that's amazing since he wanted to use the SBC 1985 for one thing and the IBC 2012 for another. But what he's saying is it states provisions of this code shall not be deemed to nullify any provisions of local, state, or federal law. Well, what that means is if there's a local, state, or federal law that's more restrictive, then this doesn't nullify a more restrictive requirement. Anywhere in any of the codes you read, when you have conflicting code issues, the more restrictive is the code that you go by. What this guy is doing is he's got a restaurant that's right under, by the time you add up his numbers, right under 100 people. By the code, the 2012 IBC, that's a A2 assembly occupancy, which basically requires the building to, I'm paraphrasing, but it would require the building to be sprinkled, no matter what the square footage. What he's done is put some low wall, what they call low walls, rails, between one area of the restaurant and another, and saying now it's separated into 2 less than 50 occupancy areas, which could be done, but not with a rail. It has to be a wall that divides, that separates the 2 areas. I guess the surprising thing to me is that this has been built and, you know, it says it's been occupied for over a year with no issues. Well, given the last year, there probably hadn't been many occupants, number one. And, you know, we've got buildings 100 years old that don't meet code, but hadn't had issues. So this whole matter to me is concerning. I guess if there's anything I would recommend, and I'll let other people talk, but I think $750 is way low. I think we ought to stay at the $3,000. And I'll shut up and let other people talk.
Hey, Brian, this is Ricky. Brian there.
Yeah, go ahead, Ricky.
I was thinking the same thing, Frank. I didn't see the rationale to drop in the fine from 3,000 to 750 because I didn't see that any really of the facts had changed other than just a continuation of the argument. But what I was drawing from this is the respondent was still incorrect on the proper classification, and so therefore the building may not meet code. And I didn't see a reason to drop the penalty, and I was going to ask what the rationale was. So I agree with your statement, Frank.
This is Stuart. Well, eventually, this is all the argument that was done at the time of the first submittal. And the respondent put on there as a Group B business, and that's when the complainant said, no, this is Group A-2. You can't separate these two areas. And so the respondent eventually, after arguing back and forth, did provide a set of plans like they were supposed to, so they get permitted and they could build. And there was also a licensed engineer that signed off, and everything was done correctly to code. However, my rationale is it's not really a competency or misconduct based on what the rules and laws say. It's more of the conduct of his practice or the conduct of what he was doing. I mean, he should have just known at the time that they'd go by the 2012 version, the city does. And they shouldn't have just argued. I mean, he just, stamp the plan, do what you're supposed to do, and then move on. But I think it's more conduct, not really competency, and the misconduct of which was that. The way that the misconduct states in the rules, it doesn't rise to that level. That was my rationale. But I'm fine with going up on the 750 because it looked like last time it was 1,000 for each alleged violation.
So Stuart, this is Ricky. So basically, there's some rationale or credit for eventually responding by getting seal drawings and using an engineer. The thing that, so I do see that. The thing that is concerning though, as far as the kind of professional conduct end of things, is the plan in the first place having a knee wall basically be the thing to get you out of meeting the code. That does seem to be kind of either a professional conduct or a negligence kind of an issue to try to use something like a knee wall or a rail to get you out of what is put in the code for life safety purposes. So that's kind of a poor judgment type call that I think is a little more than just being obstinate here. But that's probably more Frank and Brian's area.
This is Stuart again, and I agree. I mean, it's poor judgment. It's bad conduct to undermine codes like that when, you're talking about building, you're going to have occupants, and you're talking about the health, safety, and welfare of the public. I felt like that the allegations and that we have to prove don't rise up to the level on the competency and the misconduct allegations that we have. But I believe that the conduct was lacking there. And it could be just because they've got a personal issue. They definitely have a personal issue with each other. So they shouldn't allow, this respondent shouldn't allow that personal vendetta against codes, the individual at codes, stop them from doing exactly what they're supposed to do, and that is protect the public.
Well, is there further discussion, or maybe you know a motion that kind of picks up some of this?
Hey, Brian, this is Robert. Frank, in your opinion, I mean, and I think I've heard your opinion, but just want to make sure. This guy, it was more than just personal. This guy was using, was trying to circumvent the rules, wasn't he? And possibly putting the public at risk by mixing and matching codes that suited either he or his client's purpose. Is that your sense of what's going on here?
Robert, yes. And I really, you said it's personal. I think any code official that this came up against would respond in the manner that the code official is responding. So, these guys, these two may know each other real well, and it is personal, but I don't think that's the issue. I think, this is a code violation issue that, if you wanted a disinterested party, I guess, let the state fire marshal review it. They'll say the same thing the local code officials say.
This is Blair. If I can also say, I think the personality side of it should be just totally stricken from everything. I believe the rules are the rules, and our code is what it is, and whatever we design should be designed to the most current code, period, under every circumstance. So I agree with what Frank's saying, is it no matter who would review this, it seems that they would agree with what the code reviewer came up with.
Well, does anybody want to at least take a stab at a motion, and we can discuss it if we need to?
Well, and so Brian, I don't, that may be a question that for Stuart and Frank. I mean, I agree with what Blair said and what Frank has kind of confirmed. This is really not a personality thing. It's somebody that doesn't follow the codes and rules, and does that not put this in another level of enforcement that would change what that motion would be?
This is Stuart again. I agree with a lot of what is being said. I don't want y'all to think that I'm not, but I think that the allegation of the violation is to stick with the proper conduct of practice is what I'm trying to get my point across to.
And that proper conduct is $1,000 per instance, Stuart?
It is, the standard is 1,000 or 750, I believe. I might have to look at that chart. I believe it's 750. With mitigating, it's 500, and with aggravating, it's 1,000.
Okay.
And this is definitely aggravating.
Brian, this is Ricky. One more question. So I guess if the respondent did end up submitting all the drawings that were needed, and the building was eventually constructed, do we know that means that the plans ended up providing a design that was for the proper assembly occupancy classification, so that it was all corrected in the end? Is that what we're thinking? And do you know that, Frank?
I really, I just read this yesterday, this new information part. And it appears that it was submitted as a business occupancy from what I'm reading here. maybe they bought his argument. I don't know.
Well, this complaint was filed after them going back and forth about the occupancy. And so when that was decided by the board back then, and then the consent order, the proposed consent order was sent out, it was after that, then when everything got was submitted correctly and built and everything else. So that's why I'm not wanting to go after any type of allegation of competency or misconduct. Everything was planned the way it was supposed to be. But I believe there's a conduct issue here. Obviously, trying to undermine codes or argue with codes, and that's where I'm trying to go is the conduct and potentially putting the public in harm.
This is Ricky. Stuart, I agree with you that it becomes a conduct issue if the respondent ended up providing plans and a design that was the proper, that meets code. I think the problem is, I don't know how we set a penalty. If the code really requires assembly occupancy here and sprinklering, and we've got a building out there for a restaurant that's a business occupancy that's non-sprinklered, and if that's incorrect, we've got a different penalty, and I think a different rules violation. It seems like to set a penalty, we need to know what actually got constructed, what did those final plans show, and is that correct? I may be off base, but that's kind of where I'm landing on this, is we don't really know enough about what's out there.
But don't we have to trust the code official who approved what he brought back to them?
That's what I was going to say, is the group was changed. I mean, the only way it would pass codes is to change it back to assembly.
Okay.
And not B.
So if we know that, then I understand your rationale then, if we know that was done.
Right. Sorry, I didn't make that
That's okay.
clear.
Thank you.
Well, how's everybody feeling? Do we think we kind of have something narrowed in, or do we need more information? Another pitch out there for a motion, and we at least can debate where we kind of go from there if we need to.
Well, I'll go ahead and make a motion then to authorize the civil penalty of $750 for failure of proper conduct of practice and to pass the law and rules exam.
This is Blair. I will second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and proper second. Any more discussion? Okay, roll call vote.
Yes, sir. Mr. Tibbs.
Yes.
Mr. Burside.
Yes.
Mr. Brigta.
Yes.
Mr. Parker.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Ms. Doss.
Yes.
Mr. Wagster.
Yes.
Mr. Barrick.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much.
That concludes the legal report. Thank you, everyone.
Brian, since we've been kind of talking about this, there is one thing. This is Frank, by the way. There is one thing that this brings up that I've run into in the past, and it's the Tennessee Reference Manual for Building Officials and Design Professionals. And in it refers to the 1985 Standard Building Code and it does say restaurants under 100 occupants shall be classified as business occupancy. That needs to be changed. The IBC which started, 2000 at least. Since the IBC, the standard building code is not even published anymore. So to use it in our reference manual is kind of ridiculous. The IBC, it ought to refer to the IBC of the latest version of that the state is using in the state fire marshal's office. And right now that's 2012, and they're in the entertaining moving to 2015. But somebody needs to, I don't know if it's the who makes this revision. I don't know if it has to be done. That may be a law. It may be part of a law, but that needs to be researched. Stuart, if you would look into that and see how we can get that changed.
Hey Frank, it's Robert, and I know that Stuart look into it, but I'll give you what I think I know of the history. That's in there because it only references the definitions. There's some definitions in that code that we use that are, I believe, part of the law, and that's the only. And again, I don't know. 9,000 times more about the International Building Code and the SBC, but there's something in the way that it defines what a house is. There's some definitions that is embedded somewhere in our law that we have been hesitant to change because it would open up a bunch of other things that we had to go change. Now, again, I'll let Stuart do what he does, or Maria, whoever, but there is some reason and rationale behind it. It's not just because of not trying to keep up.
Well, Robert, I understand what you're talking about, and you're right. That is about definitions, but at least that portion of the definition that is definitely against the current IBC codes needs to be taken out and make them compatible.
So this has come up. I've heard about this too over the years of that. Some of the language, I think Robert is right, is something within the law that makes it a little complicated. But however, Michael Stewart, is this something that, because I think this kind of first goes back to the fire marshal, is this something that we should put together, like something in our architecture committee or whatever, or can this group just work with you guys on or Maria, the language that we need to send back to the, just to get this conversation back? I think it's stalled a few years ago, maybe, is what my understanding is, and I could be incorrect. Just help us to know the right path to get this, because this has been an issue.
This is Stuart. I believe this is probably something that the committee should entertain, and I'm happy to get with Maria to figure out what we need to do about this, and I would put it under committee, and then that could just be discussed and go from there.
So why don't we do that, Frank, and then we can put it on our next agenda. Is that okay?
Yeah, that sounds good, Brian. And Stuart, if you could give us an idea of what that process would be, an update when we actually have the meeting and discuss that. We probably agree on what needs changing, but how it gets done, to me, is the big question.
Frank, this is Michael. We'll schedule that architects committee meeting for the day before the next scheduled board meeting in April.
All right, that sounds good.
And Brian,
all right.
Hey, Brian.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I want to make sure I remember what Robert is talking about, being throughout the years, our legal counsel really kind of advised us not to touch this. And so I know I'm not saying that we shouldn't go ahead and fix it. But the legal advice was to leave it alone, that they felt like it worked for its purpose. Its purpose in our statute is to define what kind of buildings need architects or engineers, professional architects or engineers to design them. And the thought was, even though the code's out of date, the reference could still make this work on what needed a registered architect or engineer. And there was this fear of going into this statute that when you start to change that, you have no idea what's going to come out of the legislature that we'll then have to deal with on what requires architect and engineer. So I'm not saying, I'm not trying to squelch doing this, but I do want to bring that back up, that there were reasons why we didn't go into this before, that in doing this, we ought to consider again.
Point taken. Yeah, I still think we could at least have a committee conversation about it, and if you guys are still accepting of that idea, and then that gives some time for our present legal to look into it, and we can just, maybe that'll be what we end up with again, but maybe this is the right time. I think we should move it forward unless. And I tell you what, we put it on the agenda, and if by the time it comes up, if something we have different, we won't. But I would say let's just keep it on the architect agenda for next meeting. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'm going to move on to the director's report. Not trying to circumvent anything, but just keep it moving.
Okay, thank you, sir. Attached to your packet of information, you received a most recent financial statement, which was from November of last year. This reflects a $209,000 net surplus at the moment and a $2.5 million reserve. I'd be happy to entertain any questions about this if there are any. Okay, hearing none. I need to update the committee assignments list and just the committee assignments list and who's where. With Mr. Barrick being on the board now, I wanted to point out that our committees, there are, let's see, a vacancy on the Interior Design Committee, which currently is Ms. Doss and Mr. Wagster. There is not a third person. We have a vacancy on the Nominations Committee, vacancy in the Continuing Education Committee, and 2 vacancies in the Definitions Committee. Since Kathy Ware resigned from the board, we now need a chairperson there and also a 5th member of the committee. I don't know if you all would like to entertain that right now, but I'd be happy to have that conversation and then go through a nomination process.
This is Robert Campbell. Michael, I thought that was typically the purview of the board chair to assign committee responsibilities.
That'd be fine. This being my first time, I just wanted to have this conversation. So that if that's how this has been done in the past, and that is how I'm happy to continue it.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I let you down there, Michael. I didn't realize that either. For Robert, just because you were brought it up, is this just something that I just do and let each member know about? Is that something I need to work to?
Yeah, I mean, typically what has been done in the past is the board chair asks people, or if it's sometimes the engineering committee, architect committee may appoint somebody from their committee, but typically it's the board chair that says, hey, do you want to continue serving? Do you want to do this? Obviously, for some committees like landscape architect committee where Blair's your only one. I mean, he makes obvious the chair. So there's some that are natural, but it's typically been the board chair that has populated these committees. And there are a couple of them, Brian, remember that that are done based on what we have in like the finance committee's got to have the board treasurer, and there's certain offices that are supposed to be on there. Yeah, I think it's been up to you as the chairman to do that. That's what happened when I rotated a couple times.
Oh, okay. Thanks. I appreciate that. So Michael, why don't you and I just have a separate call to go through that list, and then I will do what you guys need me to do. I'll take that on. Is that okay? You and I just set up another time to chat to pull that through. Did you get that, Michael? I don't know.
Well, it's gotta happen to me once a week that I forget to unmute myself. Yes, that's fine. I'll connect with you after this meeting so that we can schedule a time to talk about that. In the meantime, I'll send you a copy of the committee assignments that I have. And just so you know, given the nature of Mr. Barrick's profession, we did go ahead and just assumed that he would be on the engineers committee since he is one, and he did attend that meeting yesterday as a member of the engineer committee.
Okay, that sounds great. Is it different from the list that you sent out in the board packet?
No, it should be that same list.
Okay, all right. I do have that, so
Okay.
I will look from that, and we'll talk. We'll set up a time to talk.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
The last item I have on my report is really an update from something that happened in December, just before Christmas. There was a system mishap, and we have received a lot of traffic regarding the letter that went out, and we're still trying to ascertain how many engineers received the letter. But in essence, what happened was there was an error in the system, and a number of people received a letter from us stating that congratulations, they had passed the PE exam. From best we could tell, this went out indiscriminately to an unspecified number of engineers. And like I said, we're working on figuring that out. However, I wanted to let you all know this. I'm not sure if you had received any questions from other people or comments about that incident. But in any event, now that you know what happened, and so if anyone does contact you or has contacted you in the recent past about that, feel free to let them know that we're working to fix that situation. But I think that in many cases, a lot of people who received the email might have just recognized it as a mistake in the system. So with that, if there's any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them as best I can.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Michael.
Sure.
Any questions for Michael? All right, I think we're ready for the committee reports. Looks like the first one up is landscape.
Hey, Brian. Sorry, I didn't get unmute. We had a discussion last month about the certificates. It was on our minutes. Did we ever come to a resolution on that?
No, sir. There was no change. I had proposed making the certificates smaller, which, based on the discussion that was had, that was an idea that was not likely to get a nomination or gosh, what's the word just gave me, but it was not likely to get a passing vote. So I think it was deemed that that we keep the certificates the same size.
I just think we probably ought to have something on the record then that just says, based on our discussion from last meeting, no action will be taken on the certificates or something, so that it doesn't pop up again some other place.
All right. Well, I think it was just added to the record right now.
That's what I'm hoping for. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions presently? If not, you all, if you think of something later, always feel free to email me or give me a call at any time. And I will do the best that I can to answer your questions. Thank you, Mr. Tibbs.
All right, thank you. Landscape Committee?
Thank you. This is Blair. We had a really good meeting yesterday. Really helpful meeting, I think. A lot of really good discussion for everybody who was on the call. And for those new to the board, I'm sure you already know that the language of the statute and rules for each of our professions is a little different. In the case of landscape architecture, there is very little, the way our law, our statute and rule is written, it provides very little discretion for the committee or the board to review applicants that may have extenuating circumstances. And I provided a few examples of it, whatever. So I think everybody's on board with that. What our committee decided to do is that I will work directly with Maria, and Michael, and we will come up with a plan as to how to attack this. But basically looking at our current statute, and if it requires us to assemble something, put something together and approach it that way, then we will. What I'd like to do is to come back to the committee, our next meeting, though I haven't really checked with Maria and Michael to verify that. It's my hopes that we can come back in the April meeting, have a committee meeting at that time, and bring this back to the committee to review and show you where we are and what our recommendations are. Good meeting. Now, I will say it was noted that Mr. Wagster, who was absent from this meeting, chose to go get his vaccination as opposed to attend the Landscape Architecture Committee meeting. So it was well noted, Mr. Wagster. That's the end of my report. Mr. Wagster, I'm joking.
Yeah, thanks for calling me out.
Congratulations on getting that.
All right, any questions? All right, seeing none, thank you very much, Blair. Move on to the Interiors Committee.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. This is Melanie Doss, and we have just one order of business today. Our meeting yesterday that was originally scheduled for 10:30 a.m. We did not conduct the meeting. We did not have a quorum, and so we will reschedule that meeting sometime in the near future. And one of the reasons why we did not have a quorum is because we have a vacancy on that committee. And I would like to fill that vacancy as soon as we possibly can. And Michael, I guess this is the appropriate time for me to nominate a candidate for that vacancy. Is that correct?
I believe, yes, I believe you could put a nomination out right now for consideration by the chair.
Okay. I would like to nominate Alton Heathcote.
Melanie, this is Alton. I'd be tickled to pieces to serve if it's the will of the board that I do that. Thank you. And the chairman, of course.
Great.
I'll have to think about, no, I'm just joking. Yeah, I will, I think this goes back to what Michael brought up about the committees, but definitely thank you, Melanie, and I will, I'll definitely strongly consider that. No.
Everyone, this is Maria from legal. I just wanted to make one point that I am going to meet with Michael in upper legal just to go over the whole issue of the voting rights. And so presently, I believe there are 3 members on the Interior Design Committee, if I'm not mistaken. But I just don't know if we've determined that Alton, as an associate member, doesn't have voting privileges. And so if there was ever an impasse with, you know, Melanie and the other member on the committee, then you would get a tie. So I just want to bring that to everyone's attention.
Hey, Maria, this is Michael. Thanks for bringing that up. I'll get with you and discuss that before I get with Mr. Tibbs to go over the list of potential nominees and filling those vacancies.
Okay, thank you, Michael. And thank you, Melanie, for your interiors. Is there any more questions, by the way, for from the Interiors Committee before I move on?
That concludes my report. But if anyone has any other questions, I'd be more than happy to entertain those.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Engineering Committee.
Very well. This is Steve King. As noted in the last minutes that Alton gave a report in the December meeting, the Engineering Committee has been asked to develop a path to licensure for your technology degrees. We did discuss that as he noted in December. We also had an additional meeting on January the 20th where we invited, I think it was 2 deans from schools in Tennessee who have both EAC degrees and ETAC degrees. We got some information from them. We also had another faculty member, I think, from a technology school that spoke. We took that information, went away, and came back on February the 3rd, yesterday, had some more discussion about that topic. We are leaning toward a recommendation that we'll continue to discuss, and we'll be bringing it back to the board when we're ready. Yesterday, we also reviewed several applications. We reviewed some correspondence from a codes official that had asked a registrant registered engineer to write a letter of certification. The individual questioned whether he was allowed to stamp such letter, and I think our conclusion was that the committee felt like there was no prohibition for that, but there may be some problems with that, and I think Maria was going to correspond with that individual concerning the potential solution. We also discussed, in addition to the technology degree, we have 3 other items that are similar that we've been discussing, and we're trying to move toward a resolution on those. One is decoupling that you've heard us discuss in the past. We think that could be a potential law change. We discussed a pathway for licensure for individuals who have don't have an undergraduate degree in engineering, but have a master's degree in engineering. And we discussed briefly a pathway for licensure for foreign degrees. The legal has advised us that the solution for the four-year technology degree could be a rule change that we continue to work on. The other three probably are law changes. So that's a very brief summary of what we have spent probably close to 7 or 8 hours since the December meeting working on. But we plan another meeting in March, and then we will have one right before the next board meeting in April. So there will be more to come, and I would invite any of the other engineering committee members to add anything that I might have left out. Thank you.
All right. Any questions or comments from anyone else on the committee? All right. I think that concludes then the committee reports and everything. Oh, no, we have, I guess you got into a little bit. Maybe go into the rest of the old business part, I guess, part of that, Michael?
Yes, sir. The definitions remains as an old business item as requested at a previous meeting late last year. It was asked of me that I include definitions on here so that it is not lost track of. I don't have anything for you. I think it was meant to be as a reminder for you all to prompt discussion and or have updates on how that stands.
If I may interject and ask a question at this time about the definitions. It is my understanding that the definitions of all groups of the board will be released at the same time when they are all updated and ready to be released. Is that correct?
Hey, Brian, this is Ricky. If I may comment. Melanie, I was kind of going to ask a question about that very point, because where I thought it stood was that Kathy had kind of spearheaded the engineering definition, was basically ready, kind of teed up and ready, and there were some things holding maybe the other disciplines up, and I think she was pointing it in the direction of the engineering definition, not necessarily waiting on the others, but that's my memory. I'm looking for whether other people, what they remember, but I was going to ask that question, where things stand.
Well, I'm also of the same, the interior design definition, it's my understanding that that is complete and ready to go. And I would like to have a discussion to see if it would be possible to release that definition independently of, or sooner, I guess, rather than later, and possibly on its own if the other committees are not ready, if the other disciplines are not ready to release theirs.
Melanie, this is Robert Campbell. And I'm going to go along with what Ricky said. We were, Kathy's version had been vetted by the engineering committee, and we were moving forward basically on our own. I think the thing we were waiting on was, I think legal was going to review them and make any kind of edits or that needed to be made. And I think also the professional societies were going to review, and I don't know, since Kathy left, I'm not sure where that process stopped, or if it's ongoing, but I think we were going to kind of go on when everybody's ready, they were ready to be to be done, is my understanding as well.
Melody, this is Frank. I think the architects are the holdup. And to answer your question, it was my understanding that everything was going to be presented at the same time. And the architect's holdup is the NCARB is reworking the definition of the profession of architecture. And so we were waiting on their update, which they were supposed to have done last June, but given the pandemic situation, they have put that off, and I believe they should have something ready here in the next couple of months.
Okay.
But hopefully I'll be able to give an update at the next meeting. But I think everybody else, and Blair, you can let us know about the landscape, but I think everybody else, the interior, the engineering, and the landscape architects have kind of settled on their definition for those, for each one. I think we're the holdup.
Okay, very good.
This is Blair. The landscape architects, we are pretty settled, but I am in process of having it reviewed one final time. So we'll be ready to go, I believe, Frank, when the architectural side is taken care of.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
This is Michael. If I could ask all of you, committee chairman, to please email me a copy of your working draft at the moment, just so I have something to go on. I was not with the board when all of this process began, and therefore I haven't seen those definitions, and it would be good for me to have a copy at least, so that for reference, one, and in the event that there needs to be emails made regarding them, and those copies need to go out to other board members, I'll be the one disseminating that information.
All right. Any other further conversation about that? If not, is there any new business that we hadn't touched on? Guess that goes to you, Michael, mostly, but others, if there's anything else.
I have nothing else for you, sir.
Okay. Well, that actually concludes this meeting. Before I conclude, I just want to make sure there's nothing else from anybody else, and appreciate it. Maybe, who knows, maybe if the things keep going the way they are, maybe we'll be able to meet together next time. But I definitely have learned a lot being chairman virtually. But any other further comments at all? If not, I have offer up a motion to adjourn.
Brian, this is Maria from legal. I just want to say one thing regarding an update on the PDH rules that had a long history with the board. Those actually went into effect January 26th or the 27th of this year, I believe. So just wanted to let everybody know that, it did take some time, but that rule is now in effect, and that will phase out the carryover hours beginning in 2023. So if anybody has questions about that or needs further details, feel free to reach out. And I'm happy to talk more about it, but that's my update.
Okay. Here we go. Make a note of that.
Yeah, I think it may be a good idea to get back with our professional societies and just remind them of that, and maybe have bullet points of what those are, or is that shortchanging the system?
Yes, I've been in touch with Ashley Cates about this, and I can also, I've sent out the notifications that are required by statute, and just kind of a chart of what the changes look like practically for each discipline, but I'm happy to reach out to the associations again and just, make sure that we're on the same page with, licensee outreach and that kind of thing.
If you would, I'll send you the contact information for Aaron, our new executive director for the Tennessee chapter of ASLA.
Yeah, this is Frank. I was reviewing the rules yesterday, and they have been updated per the new PDH revisions online.
That's awesome. Thank you, Maria.
Hey, Brian. This is Ricky.
Yes.
Yeah, and just talking about those rule changes, that's the kind of thing that makes very good material for a newsletter, that to our registrants, just to keep them, give it a little exposure and make them aware. That's a little better exposure, I think, even than the association meetings and that sort of thing. And it just brings up, I don't know that we settled on what was going on with the newsletter. We talked about it at the least making it something easy to email in PDF form. But anyway, that's the exact kind of topic that makes it so valuable to have some kind of newsletter go out to keep our registrants up with that.
This is Chris Gwaltney. Is there a chance that I could get that sent to me as well? I do a briefing for the ASCE Nashville branch and Tennessee section newsletters, and I'd like to include that in my briefing to them.
Sure. I'm just trying to think the best way to get your contact. If you want to send me an email.
Sure, I can send you an email.
Okay.
So I send it to
Maria. This is Michael. Fine. I can send you Mr. Gwaltney's contact info. I have it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Michael. That
awesome.
Probably works better than all the records.
Thank you.
All right, Maria, did you have anything else or any other comment from anybody?
That's all from me, Brian. Sorry for the last minute. I just wanted to make sure I gave you all that update.
No, perfectly fine. That's what we're here for.
Make a motion to adjourn.
All right, there's a motion, and I don't think we have to vote on it. So, but maybe we should. So moved. We will all see you guys next quarter.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
You guys have a good one.
Thank you all.
Well done, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.